Let's get close, but not so close. Quarantine. You can share from a distance. Quarantine. You know we want to see each other. You'll have to stay in your quarantine space while we talk.
It's episode 45 of Quarantine. Welcome in this week when everyone has the elections and our electoral system on our mind. Today's going to be the second show that we've done taking a look at this. And if you followed the earlier one we did, it was really inspired by friends of ours who are younger people who are Gen Zers who are asking, is the system responsive? Do I really get involved? What has happened and to the American system that makes it feel sometimes like a video game that no matter what you do with the controllers, nothing seems to change on the screen, which of course, from a video design point of view, is bad design. You wouldn't want to play that game, but we want everyone to play the game of being in a republic. And that's what we're going to talk about today with in three extraordinary segments. Let's welcome our co-host, Mickey McManus. Hey, Mick.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, this is just going to be an exciting show because we're getting to the core of three things: how the system works and how to make it more responsive, a live on-the-ground report from the swing states, registration, turnout, walking the vote, and then on to some friends who are Gen Zers with amazing followings. They are the future of citizenry and engagement. This is going to be a cool one. Mick, why don't you tell us about our first guest, your friend Katherine Gale, who will walk us through our system.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. So only a newfound friend. I'm just a fan, really. I was at a festival last year, and Katherine got up with Michael Porter from Harvard Business School and talked about what they put in this new book, The Politics Industry. And I think you could have heard a pin drop halfway through because everyone in the audience was just like, oh my gosh, I've never looked at the sort of political industrial complex for what it really is. And they did kind of a five forces, a business analysis of it. And I was just blown away. I've dog-eared the heck out of this book. There are lots of real actions. And so I'm super happy to have Katherine on the show and joining us today to just share what they found and where they see us being able to do something at a very sort of nonpartisan way to just say, we love America. How could we actually make it anew again? How could we actually kind of focus the political system to actually work for us as citizens? So that'll be our first guest. Do we want to bring Katherine on right now?
Yeah, I think we should get to it because we have an action-packed day. Let's
Katherine.
Start. Hi, guys.
Hey, Katherine, how are you?
I'm great.
You have written a book with Michael Porter, who's well known as one of the top business strategists, and you have a long career in business, and you've turned to our political system and you're analyzing it from a business and a competitive point of view. Everybody feels that there is something wrong with the way certainly our national electoral system works, but what you have found is both prescriptions and a sense of the problem. So perhaps you can share
it's almost like you did a really fascinating root cause analysis, and we'd love you to just take us through it. You know what, and a little back of your background would help everyone understand kind of where you're coming from. So maybe
how about I try to do root cause and my background at the same time in some mini version?
Perfect.
Because I believe, Mickey, when you and I met, I probably went on for about an hour.
You did.
Okay, so my background is really in business. And I'm from Wisconsin. I ran a food manufacturing company. They're a high-tech food manufacturing company. We actually did make cheese. And about 2013, I was redoing the strategy for my entire company. I had a $250 million company, 350 employees, and figuring out how can we grow our company and do better in the marketplace. And I used these classic tools of competition, including the five forces that Michael Porter, who's now my co-author, had invented years before. And while I was doing this strategy for my company, issues kept popping up in the other side of my head effectively about the politics system because I cared deeply and I didn't think things were going well. So here's some of the questions that came up for me. Hey, how come politics doesn't have to make their customers happy to keep doing really well in the industry? Which is to say, I knew, 90% of people are dissatisfied with Congress, and yet Congress has this enormous reelection rate, and the business just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And then because I thought, if my customers didn't like what I was doing, they would just buy from someone else. Oh, why is there never anyone else to buy from, or shall we say to vote for, other than Republicans and Democrats in the politics industry? Because in my industry and any other industry I've worked in, if the customers were dissatisfied, but the industry was doing really well, which politics is, everybody in that industry makes a lot of money and has a lot of power, then in any other industry, if the customers weren't happy, an entrepreneur would come in and create a new company responding to what customers wanted, but that never happens in politics. And so essentially, by the end of my strategy for my business, I had come to this very clear view that in the politics industry, we don't get innovation, we don't get results, and we don't get accountability. The three things that we get in healthy competition in all other industries. So the question is, why don't we get those things, and how can we get those things? And it takes a long time, in a sense, to figure out the why. But the reason we do that is not to be particularly interesting about it, but so we can figure out precisely where we can intervene in this dysfunctional cycle to turn politics into a system where the people playing that game, shall we say, are incented to do what needs doing for the country, for the public interest, and for the citizens.
So classically, when people look at this, they say things like, well, the way the electoral college is created, it's very tough to go change that. That may increasingly misrepresent us. Or the way that redistricting works polarizes us. When you put money into politics, it further amplifies interests. And then people get a little dissatisfied because it's going to require constitutional amendments and nobody can agree on things. How do you approach the real politic of America today, the desire to do better, and the realization that we're kind of sclerotic at this?
Yeah. So again, as a business person, I care. I'm not saying other people don't care about this, but when I was doing this, I was still deeply in business, and I'm saying, what can we do about it? Not theoretically, how would we make it different, but what's actually worth doing and doable. And I called that, sort of powerful and achievable. And when I talk about things being powerful in the system, I mean, what could we change that, if we changed it, would change the likelihood that Congress would begin to deliver results in the public interest? So I don't focus on what should we change that would change the likelihood that different people would get elected, although it may, but it may also not. I care about the action, not as much who wins, but the actions that the winners are incented to take, and on whose behalf they're incented to take them. So that's what something needs to be powerful. And then the second piece is, it has to be achievable, which, as you guys just said, pretty much takes out most constitutional amendments. For the same reason we can't get anything else done right now, we're not going to come together to agree on a constitutional amendment. So if it's going to be in the doable category, it also has to be something where we'll see the results in congressional action, legislation, and therefore in people's lives within a matter of years, not decades. So those
I think
together, and that's what we recommend.
And your book, you use a lot of visuals, which I really love, and in your presentation, sort of the achievable and powerful, right? And if these are not intersecting like a Venn diagram, that's not very useful. But it's also get reelected and serve citizens. And it turns out to get reelected, you might have to do some things that don't actually serve the citizens, but might serve other customers. What did you find in this sort of exploration of who the customers are of the political industrial complex if they're not the citizens?
Yes.
And kind of what are some, insights on that front?
So every industry has customers, and the politics industry has the public interest as a customer, which I would say is the same as citizens, the voters, how we would move the country forward. But the politics industry also has other customers. They have a subset of voters, which are voters who participate in party-controlled primaries. And those voters, it's a very small number of voters, and they tend to be far more ideological than voters as a whole. They also have donors as a customer, and they have special interests as a customer. And sometimes those customers are overlapping. And what we found is, and this won't really come as a surprise, the most important customer is not the public interest. And then this is where it intersects with something else, which is the most important customer is not the public interest. And one of the main reasons it's not is because no new competition can come in to say, hey, I'll make you the most important customer, you, the public. And I will deliver solutions instead of just rhetoric. And I won't just
a closed system.
Yeah. So
well, and for Porter's 5 forces, it's the existing competitors. So is this a closed loop? It's the suppliers coming in from one side. It's the channels that they get those things from the other side, and the customers. And then above, it's the sort of, is there a substitute? Are there new entrants? Is there a chance to get this in? And I think for business people, everyone kind of had to learn about the 5 forces and kind of how to think about those. But applying this to our politics and saying, wait a second, who are the customers? How could a green party, a blue party, a purple party, or whatever it might be, how could they even get a foothold and actually be, I think the way you framed it was kind of beautiful. Might we have a private interest for the public interest, in some ways? Like
we say a special interest for the public interest.
Yeah, special interest for the public interest.
And that's what I say, our political philanthropists who are now working not on behalf of candidates or policies, but are working on the rules of the game of politics that created these incentives that has the most important customer be not solving problems and getting real results for the public.
What are some of the tricks? Oh, sorry, Peter.
I think we're both heading the same direction. You must have a highly leveraged set of recommendations or things that can be slid into the system that can start producing some results.
I do. So we looked at everything, all the popular and even less popular ideas for what we should change. And again, the criteria is, let's not change things that make us feel better, and let's not change things that may just be a Trojan horse for partisan advantage for one side of the duopoly or the other. So let's not do political reform. Let's do political innovation. Let's innovate because it's innovation that substantively changes the trajectory of any system or any industry. And political innovation are these structural changes that will change the incentives. And there's one set that's the most powerful first mover. And shockingly, it is at what I would say the sweet spot of that overlapping Venn diagram, powerful and achievable. And we call this final 5 voting. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get rid of party-controlled primaries. Because right now, party-controlled primaries push people to the right and the left, and they make it impossible when they're legislating for those legislators to think about the public interest and coming together and working out the trade-offs, because the only thing they can care about in our existing system is, what do I have to do to make it back through my party-controlled primary with that small number of highly ideological voters? They can't answer.
Give us it sort of really tangibly. What does a final 5 voting look like?
Yeah,
how would that be different than what it looks like today?
Yeah, so final 5 voting is, let's get rid of the party primaries, and instead you'll have one single ballot primary. And
so everyone in the country could vote during the primary?
No. So again, let's talk about Congress, okay?
Okay, yeah.
The answer does not lie with a mythical president who fixes everything.
Perfect, okay.
Get at Congress first, okay? So we go into Congress, so you're going to vote for your senators and in the same districts you have right now. But when you go to the primary, There'll be one ballot, all the candidates, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Greens, Purples, running on the same ballot. You vote, and when the votes are counted, the top 5 finishers will advance to the general election. So now we have a diverse campaign of ideas, innovations, candidates, visions. And then the second thing we do is now when you go to the general election, you have 5 candidates to choose from, and you're going to rank them all the way from, oh my gosh, this is my favorite candidate, down to something like your 5th choice, over my dead body, do I want that person to win?
Right.
And those rankings create the opportunity for a series of instant runoffs. So we'll elect the person with the broadest appeal to the most number of voters. But the main thing is it's by having that ranking that we create an opportunity for new competition. Because
so I remember,
and
there's this great, I mean, I'm sorry, I dog-eared the heck out of this page, but you know, it's nice because it's got like Alexander Hamilton, Ben Franklin, I think it's also got, Abigail Adams, you know, and the reason rank order voting matters mathematically, and there have been studies of this around the world from the statisticians unions and from all the data scientists, is that it's actually a more realistic way of tracking things and making sure you don't get survivorship bias, you don't get these other kinds of things that actually bias the system. So rank ordered voting forces you to say this, but the flip side of it is rank ordered voting means that all the people campaigning have to try to reach the most people, so they can't sort of polarize so much, I guess. Is that fair, or maybe there's something different?
Interesting. I think that yes, there is some evidence that people will not want to demonize other candidates because they may want to be those candidates' second choices. But I want to bring up something about healthy competition. We're going to now have all these 5 candidates competing for the squishy middle, and we would never want that. Innovation comes from fringes. That's the way it works in industry and even in politics. So what I love about Final 5 voting is we get the benefit of allowing diverse debate, and people can continue to have passionate ideologies and come from different areas. But then they're incented to work together after they're elected to reach something practical that moves us forward. So we're going to get the benefit of both. The answer is not the squishy middle. But let me also give you an example. Competition works not because it changes who wins and not just because of who wins. So in industry, we see in technology all the time, there's a new startup and they figured out a technology. Now, maybe they grow to become the winner, or maybe they become bought, or maybe if they didn't, protect their intellectual property, some larger company just adopts it. But the advancements move forward for the consumer.
It also pushes this innovation, right? It's just, yes, in fact, more people get better things because of the competition, because Walmart has to lower their prices, but they also, I was a product designer for years, they actually push you to be net zero if you're a supplier. They actually push you to reduce the amount of plastic there because of innovation.
Yeah, I know.
So
Katherine,
we need that competition in politics, and with healthy competition is what gives us results, innovation, accountability.
hey, I have a question. Certain places have implemented ranked choice voting, which is, I think, what we're talking about. Like, I think we have that here in California for a couple of years. Is there evidence that when we insert that, things start behaving differently? What's kind of the empirical of what's going on here?
So in California, what you guys have done is you got rid of party-controlled primaries. So now you just have single ballot primaries, but you only let the top 2 vote getters advance. Thank you so much for being innovative and realizing that was a first problem. But the 2 reasonably reinforces the duopoly.
Yeah.
You create enough debate. We don't have, in a sense, enough fringe. And so now we recommend top 5. I predict that you will in California have the chance to vote on an amendment in the future for Final 5. And then once you have more than 2 candidates, you'll need to add the ranked choice voting piece in the general election. Otherwise, you could have someone win with, only 21% of the vote out of 5 candidates. Who's
done this? Who's done it well, or who's like a state? I know that even back when Obama was a senator, they were trying to do some things in Illinois. I'm a Chicagoan from birth, so but also I thought there were some Northeast states or areas that were trying aspects of this. Is there anyone that we can look to?
aspects of this have been tried, and there's also aspects that exist overseas. And there's also theoretical design principles. So the package of Final Five voting as the ideal design for this incentives system and the right amount of debate, et cetera, has not been implemented in this precise way. We will see an opportunity, and Alaska's going to vote on November 3rd on something that's super similar, Final Four voting. So it's the same, but the top
Closer.
four.
Yep. Yeah.
But and Maine, for example, became the first state to implement ranked choice voting, and they will be using it, again in their election in November. But Maine didn't do the first part of getting rid of the eye of the needle that is the party primary. But when we look at the successes that these pieces have, not just in these states and also municipalities and overseas, it does come together to support the package and my contention that Final Five voting, open top 5 primaries plus ranked choice voting in the general election is basically 1 + 1 = 10.
Yeah, it's a big phase change. It's not a trivial thing.
Together, that's my message to everybody here. Work in your state and change both at the same time.
Katherine,
So it'd be nice if we put up a little, I don't know, Mohib, if you can do this, but I just put up the GehlPorter.com site that just has stuff about the book. And how would you like people to get more information about this or engage or beyond? I'm going to tell everyone to read the book, but what else?
Gehl Porter's great. We'd love for you to buy The Politics Industry. And I will say, all the proceeds, all the authors' proceeds of The Politics Industry go straight into our work. And they get donated to a C3, a not-for-profit organization that I founded called the Institute for Political Innovation, because here's what I failed at. When we first started doing this work, we got a lot of people to like it, but we didn't set up a system that helped them move to action. So they left that presentation that you were at, Mickey, and they really did like it. But how many people did?
How do I take action? Yeah. Well, and I think you guys did an estimate of this isn't an insanely expensive thing compared to the amount of money that goes into things. So this is not like this does fit the achievable and actually move the ball. And here's the link for everyone about the Political Innovation Institute. What are you doing now? What are you doing? This is your focus now, is sort of how do you give people an approach to take action?
I mean, my focus is to be both continuing the intellectual, theoretical work, the academic work. We'll also be analyzing and documenting the outcomes that we get from these changes. I mean, you can't just, not pay attention to that. Again, I'm very data focused, et cetera. So what we want people to do, though, is go to politicalinnovation.org and get in touch with us, and we can put you in touch with a campaign in your state that's happening. We can help you start a campaign in your state. And if you want to be a political philanthropist, we can do that too. And the political philanthropy is this special interest for the general interest. It's the best ROI of any investment out there in political change. And what I mean is not just of money, time, and resource. Political innovation, structural change the rules of the game, change the way the game is played, change the outcome of the game. That's systems theory, and that's what we can do here.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Katherine.
Guests to join us, who I'm sure will want to have a conversation with you as we kind of go through this. We're going to now move out into the States, and we're going to talk to our friends Sarah and Roy Bahat, and also our friend Lena Srivanstava. I hope I pronounced that right. Sarah and Roy, why don't you come in and join us, guys? Live in San Francisco and have been on the road, crossing through Nevada and Iowa on the way to Wisconsin, where you have been working to get people registered and to walk the vote. And also joining us is your walk the vote compatriot, Lena, who...
Yeah, let's bring Lena in too. I actually think Lena or Sarah and Roy, do you have any questions or thoughts, just reactions to what you heard from Katherine? Obviously, she compressed a really deep
I mean, spend the next 40 minutes talking about San Francisco's experience with ranked choice voting.
No question.
Yeah, I have one question about it, which is, we've spent a lot of the last 4 years, Katherine, raising money for candidates and organizations. And, having studied some rational voting systems, and what you described sounds like a political application for, I don't know if you've read Radical Markets, the Glenn Weil book, where he talks about ranked choice voting. And if you want to go crazy math, he gets even into quadratic voting as a way of weighting preferences. And one of the things that's just struck me is we have this electoral system that's about votes, and then we have an electoral system about money. And we never participated in fundraising until this cycle because we thought it was pretty disgusting. That I literally think that after giving not that much money, I think I have 2 members of Congress call me who out of the blue every single day on my cell phone asking for $100 at a time. Like the people who represent our country. And I guess the question that I have is, given what you've described about how voting systems should work, what are your feelings of how money in the system should work? For those of us who have the opportunity to influence the system by giving money and maybe don't want it to be that way, just how you think about money versus votes.
Right. So, okay. I love that. So one of the things we write about in the book is that unlike any other industry, the politics industry has 2 currencies. So some of the customers that I talked about pay with votes, and some of the customers pay with money. And right now, the way the rules of the game are set up, the only customers that matter are those that pay with money. But instead of trying to go after money in politics directly head on and get self-interested money out, because there are lots of reasons why that's not in the intersection of powerful and achievable, what we need to do is raise the relative value of the power of votes. It's almost like you have an exchange rate between the two. And right now, the power of money is worth 30 times the power of votes. But with this new system, we elevate the power of every vote. We elevate all the power of every general election vote and of people who are not the dominant party in that district, et cetera. And so once votes become more important than money to re-election, you begin to just reduce the ROI on the investment of money in elections. So why is there so much money in politics? Because great ROI, it works. People who put that money in get what they want out of it. And we have to make it that even though they put that money in, the candidates can't afford to give the self-interested money what they want because they have to, based on the electoral system, prioritize what the public and voters want. And again, later, maybe you could also do some things with money in politics, but it's most powerful to first go after the reason why money has so much power.
I want to point out, we probably have an enormous amount of political innovation horsepower here. We've met you, Katherine. Roy is an actual VC. He's with Bloomberg Beta. He focuses on early stage companies that actually have to bring about innovation. His wife, Sarah, who's a good friend, teaches at the California College of the Arts. We've all met each other here over design, city, and political issues. And Lena is also a great political innovator. Lena, why don't you tell us a little bit about Walk the Vote, the process that's going on right now? And then Sarah and Roy, you have gone cross country. You're on the road, and I'd love to get kind of a report on what the mood is and what it's like getting people to turn out and walk the vote early during a pandemic, during a time of voter suppression, and during a time of such consequence. Lena.
I'd love, Lena, I'd love you to start. If you could explain a little of your background too, because I just think it's fascinating where you came from and how you sort of think of narrative and think of the power of innovation and things.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for inviting us on this program. So thank you for calling me a political innovator. That's probably a very new title. I work at the intersection of narrative design, narrative innovation, human rights, and international development. And this year is the first time I've actually been at all involved with electoral activism, electoral organizing, political organizing, and it's been a massive, just a learning curve. And I really appreciate the people who do this work. And so to call back to Katherine's point about raising the value of the vote, Roy and a man named Kevin Slavin, who I think everybody knows, pulled me onto this project called Walk the Vote. And it's about looking at voting as a collective act, as a community act, as an act of community care, and also as an act of celebration at a time when we're dealing with the pandemic and safety issues around gathering in groups and voting in groups, voting at the polls. And at a time when the U.S. Postal Service has been crippled, basically, by this administration, and we don't know if votes can get into, if they're mailed, if they're going to actually get to where they need to go. And then the third thing is to make voting an act of celebration, like an act of a celebration of civic engagement. And I think that's where I come in. That's where my work as a narrative designer and my work as a narrative innovator applies to this project, because I've been trying to look at how do we make this an event? How do we make this telegenic? How do we make this almost like a spectacle in the best way, of community-led spectacle? And so what happens is we've been encouraging voting parades around, particularly in swing states, which Roy and Sarah will talk about. But we're really hoping that people will gather together as a community and walk their ballots to these drop boxes, and cheer each other and throw a party as an act of civic engagement. So that's where I come in. That's where my experience as a narrative designer who has before not really worked on electoral activism, that's where I'm applying this, and that's where I'm trying to make a difference in this election.
So Sarah and Roy, have you been walking the vote? Tell us what it's like out there. I'm just curious because, I'm sitting here in the bubble of California and you're out there in the real America and you drove there.
We did. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think that, well, no, you go first because you have the context of having grown up here in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we're not driving right now. Right now we're in Milwaukee, in Sarah's childhood neighborhood. Catherine, we're in Whitefish Bay. And we are doing what we can from here, but you have the context and then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take a tangent and come back, I think. Roy said we were not involved in fundraising before Trump was elected. And, I'm a design professor. I run a design MBA program. And so when I think about what Catherine's talking about and connecting it to Walk the Vote, I think about the journey map approach, right? Like, what is the journey every step of the way that we as citizens sort of follow to engage in what's going on around us. And so, Walk the Vote feels like it's the end of that journey in some ways. And I think a moment for reflection on, did we do everything that we got to do? And how are we going to make it better when we come back to do it again? Our story goes back to, the recovery of an election and thinking, and this is Catherine's point too in some ways, we decided to discard the traditional approach of fundraising and rather to design an accessible approach where not only could our friends who could afford to pay to come meet candidates do so, but we invited our friends who are teachers who were never invited to come meet candidates into our home to meet them as well. Our real aspiration is to, and I think this is informed by having grown up in the Midwest for sure, our aspiration is to reduce the distance between elected officials and regular humans. And, I could tell you dozens of stories of people who felt disenfranchised, who were so delighted to be welcomed into the process and made to feel important. On the other side of the house, we've also met dozens of candidates at this point. And, I will offer that many of those candidates, especially candidates of color, struggle with fundraising far more than the people who have been in the system longer. And I'm also interested in making fundraising more accessible for them and bringing our community to support them and redesigning the way that they gather support from the communities of interest around them. I heard from somebody a couple weeks ago that they spend 30 hours a week on fundraising. And especially for people who don't come from families of means or professions like teachers where they were paid a lot, it's a real shame that we haven't found ways to get them elected and have them representing sort of the beautiful diaspora of this country. And so, we've been doing all of that work on the side, and I became engaged with the convention in Milwaukee last summer, given our fundraising work. And I sort of was delighted to be invited into the conversation about how my hometown was going to present to the country. And there's this great story about Tom Perez calling me into his office, which terrified me, of course, because to me, Tom Perez is like
the head of the DNC,
a very exciting man.
Yeah.
It turns out Tom Perez's wife is from Wauwatosa. Wauwatosa is a bit of a household name. It's been a pretty newsworthy place in the last few weeks. But, you know, he handed me a copy of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and was like, I hear you're from Milwaukee. And in fact, my first job was delivering the Milwaukee Sentinel before the merger with the Journal. And I will tell you that I delivered that newspaper on some very cold Milwaukee mornings. But my involvement in the convention really sealed for me the importance of, and the conventions are fairly bipartisan for the communities that host them, right? The goals of a local convention are to engage volunteers in a very similar to the way that Walk the Vote is doing. And so, you know, the convention obviously was digitized, if you will, and, you know, removed from Milwaukee. We had planned on spending the summer here to support the convention. You know, and when we realized that my students and classes, our children's classes, and our work could be portable this fall, we decided to make the pilgrimage and to, you know, continue to invest in this very important swing state community where I have very deep roots, rather than, you know, sit in California and twiddle our thumbs and wait for the news of what's to come next. So that's the story of how we came to be on this road trip. I will say that we stayed with family, and I didn't notice a ton of signs out in the world. We didn't see any political signs until we got to the middle of Minnesota, and we didn't go the conventional way necessarily. We saw, you know, like dueling farm, like in rural areas, we saw signs for both candidates. And all through Wisconsin, we've seen signs for both candidates. The area that we're in Milwaukee is, you know, a pretty upper middle class neighborhood, but with a pretty wide range of household incomes. And I see Biden signs everywhere. The question that I look to in Milwaukee is, how far out of Milwaukee County do you have to go for that to change? And that, you know, is the fundamental question of this election for us. So Roy's on the case for Walk the Vote Milwaukee. We have a couple walks planned for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I think, let's see, I just want to add the perspective of somebody who has never spent significant time in a swing state. Like, I grew up on the Upper West Side to immigrant parents, moved to Noe Valley, moved from like the Park Slope from Greenwich Village, which is where Sarah and I lived in New York, to the Park Slope of San Francisco. And so to me, presidential elections were always something that I saw in theory. Like, you read about them in classes or you heard about them on the news, but they didn't actually, other than that, your vote didn't matter, all that. And now being here and having driven through a few states on the way, the first thing you see is we don't have one country. I mean, we do have one country, but we also have many different countries. You know, we saw our children terrified by states we drove through where nobody was wearing a mask and like literally just shaking, terrified. And then you arrive in a place where people have different views, and in a way it's beautiful because the political conversation has come to life. And the things I observe are, one, the typical person is just not paying that close attention. And maybe that's okay. Like, we want people engaged, but it shouldn't require full-time focus on politics to make this choice. The whole point of representation is to think about it a little bit and then have somebody else decide for you. And that's just very hard to do. And there's all these conflicting messages, and it's really confusing. And so what breaks through in that? And, you know, I'll share a few observations of things that I've seen that break through. One is a candidate who really understands can break through. And so somebody like AOC, who can connect with an aspect of what people are thinking, she really breaks through. And, you know, we see candidates like that emerging. A second thing that can break through is people, every person, any person, realizing that they have more power to take part than they thought. And, you know, just speaking from personal experience, going from, yeah, we don't want to be fundraisers because, like, we're not super rich. You know, we are not in a position to, like, you know, be fat cats throwing around our influence. to saying, oh no, we can just reach out to a candidate and say like, hey, will you come to our house and talk to our friends? And then take the action, the slightly scary action of inviting our friends and thinking maybe they won't show up, but maybe they will. And that all has felt like it's, sorry to put this, it's made it clear to us that folks can do things. And obviously we have plenty of privileges, so I'm not going to pretend that everybody can do what we did, but it is changing. I mean, Sarah was talking about the DNC earlier. We had a fundraiser that we had planned for mid-March to help raise money for the DNC to work on technology. And, you know, Katherine, while I respect the fact that you are nonpartisan in what you're doing, I care a lot about which candidates win. As somebody said, I think there's somebody sent me a screenshot of something today saying this election is kind of like being on an airplane and the flight attendant comes to you and says, would you like the chicken or would you like the plate of gruel with nuts and bolts in it? And some people sitting there saying, how has the chicken been cooked? And it's like, I don't care if it's cooked, I'll take the chicken. And you know, the thing that I see is it just takes a little bit of metal to throw yourself into the process. And you can really start, you know, obviously citizens who have some options like us, but any citizen making a difference. And then the last,
I want to, before you go too much further on this, I'm curious. Well, when you talk about like inviting people to your home and things, I think this notion that Sarah articulated, which is bringing normal citizens closer to what are perceived as powerful people, so that you're actually really having a conversation. Yeah,
COVID actually,
I love that.
Because I mean, we think, well, we hosted the first DNC fundraiser that we're aware of that happened over Zoom. That first reported fundraiser.
Because we had some folks who were going to come to our house, and then COVID hit, and we're like, forget this.
No, and he works in
technology. Let's get him on Zoom.
He works in technology, and I work in education, so we're somewhat fluid with tools like the one we're using tonight, right? Yeah. But I will say that, you know, I hosted a fundraiser with a couple of people that I do that with. Shout out to Manny's and shout out to the Next 50 if you guys are here. In August for 10 Senate candidates, 10 flippable Senate seats. We never in a million years, not even the DSCC, could get 10 of those candidates in a single room, let alone with 3,000 people in attendance from 45 states and territories, right? It could not happen, actually. And it certainly couldn't happen outside of like the National Finance Committee. And all of the fundraiser, all of like the finance people on these teams thought we were nuts to aspire to do an event with all of these candidates. But I will tell you that 75% of the people in that call had never been on a call in their lives or at an event in their lives with these people. And we designed it to be human, right? Not to have like a dog and pony show where somebody tells you all these things you don't care about their state. Although we all want to know someone's favorite thing about their state, and they have a very hard time picking a favorite. But we worked with the candidates for them to have a robust conversation with one another, sort of popcorn style, so that you could almost imagine them as colleagues, right?
So Sarah, and just, you know, knowing and knowing someone very, very closely who was one of the first graduates from the DMBA program at CCA, that is like the premier how do you use design to actually do business program pretty much that I've ever seen. And you run that. And so I imagine that Zoom call was not like a normal, horrible corporate Zoom call. It was like really probably human-centered.
Actually, it was like a totally normal, boring.
Oh, what? Oh, see, I have all this imagination.
Because even though Sarah has the skill to create warmth in the room, we're all using the same tools. This is
I believe that. Yeah.
Is that the kids who are coming on, the TikTokers, they're using the exact same stuff that Lena and I are using on organizing Walk the Vote. And so what's like the playing field has totally leveled in that sense. And what makes something break through is just something people can remember that as a story. And so like, why did we start working on Walk the Vote? Because in the panoply of things a normal citizen can do, I promise you, any person, whether they can vote or not, whether they're 16 or 60, can say to their neighbors, let's go together to the polls and drop off our ballots together. Let's celebrate when each person drops off their ballot. And by the way,
we have a clip of this, and I would love to run the clip. Yeah,
we have some footage of that. So, Mohib, if you can run the we've got, because Lena designed an amazing process here. Let's take a look at our video of Walk the Vote. I think we have two. Let's go ahead and run it.
Some have been concerned about mailing their ballots, so now there's a national movement called Walk the Vote in hopes to get more people involved in this election. All around the country, people are coming together to walk their ballot to the ballot box. Jazz Martis is a junior at Michigan State University, and he is the organizer for the Walk the Vote in East Lansing. He says more than ever, our voices matter, and he's hoping to get more young people involved in this year's election.
This is one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime or anyone's lifetime, and with the unprecedented situation that we are in when it comes to how people can vote, we are trying to address that solution in an unprecedented way by bringing folks together to march to the polls and turn in their ballots early to truly participate in our democracy.
Did we see any of that? It sounds like we only got the very end of it. Roy,
Yeah, we got that. But I think, Lena, you were explaining that some people at the end of putting the mail in, and you guys are pacing everybody or putting the ballot in because of social distancing. So these are families, these are people helping older people get there. These are people protecting people in maybe dangerous neighborhoods. And when they get there, there's a band and people are like playing music and you're like putting the ballot in, and it just seems crazy. And you've designed this, Lena, from your standpoint, as a very cellular kind of approach where different people kind of have a little bit of a toolkit and they figure out how to do it. Can you say just a word or two or a little more about that? Because I think that's amazing.
Sure. So it wasn't only me that designed this. There's a whole group of people who designed this, and there's a core creative team of designers who've done this. So we made it so we've created a toolkit for people so that they can create their own aesthetic, create their own tone. So every single walk was going to be different. But the one thing that we do encourage is that at the end of it, everyone cheers or everyone has a celebration at the end. Because again, we want this to be an act of joy and an act of, because joy is political. It is resistance, right? And we want it to be an act of civic engagement that everybody can do together. So that's the way it's designed. And I just want to call back to something that Katherine said, which is that innovation does come from the fringes. And what I love about Walk the Vote is that this engages voters across the country, across regions, it is nonpartisan. It engages people across socioeconomic strata. And what I particularly love about it, particularly coming from my sort of narrative and human rights stance, is that it engages voters who aren't always engaged, and that campaigns don't reach out to, that these efforts they aren't invited to fundraisers and such. But this is a way for people this is a way to level the playing field. And so if we are going to talk about raising the value of votes, especially in a world where money really has flooded the system, then we've got to engage those voters who people are not talking to and are actively being suppressed, right? So when you look at the number, the hours of lines, particularly in communities of color, we haven't necessarily done yet, Roy and I have to talk about this, but we haven't necessarily talked specifically about how Walk the Vote can help alleviate some of that, the voter suppression, the long lines. I'm hoping we do some celebration around that. But this is a way to level that playing field, and that's where innovation is going to come from.
I have a question.
Yeah,
let me throw a question in. Either you can answer it. So much of this is happening in real time, in the sense that we have 3 weeks to go, and then you realize, okay, one state says there's fewer drop-off ballot boxes, and then you might see a suppression mechanism, and then maybe there's a flare-up of the disease somewhere. So this is a very much of a real-time mechanism that's adapting to conditions. How are you both adapting real-time and adding membership and making this innovation mechanism a learning thing that is always changing?
I mean, one thing I'll offer on that is Walk the Vote in and of itself is a real time adaptation, because Sarah and I had finished doing a fundraiser and said, okay, can't raise that much more money. There's only like 2 months left. What are we going to do here to actually move the needle? And so many incredible groups are already out there with wonderful strategies for engaging communities. And we just asked, what is new in this election that needs a hand? And this activity of showing up at ballot drop boxes, there was no group focused on that. And, Lena was alluding to so many of these reasons. It's joyous, it's safer than voting in person, and it's more reliable than the mail. And then you start to see all these other advantages when you start innovating, because innovation produces the unexpected. And I'll give you one example, which is every single time I see a tweet of somebody saying, fuck this voting suppression thing of I have to like prepare like I'm going camping to go voting because I might be there for 12 hours and bring every form of ID and blah, blah, blah. One response to it is, you know what? Safety in numbers. Super different for one person who has been excluded from their community to show up and get turned away versus 50. And so, you know, you want to be able to get out the vote in a community that's been disenfranchised. Try showing up with your friends and see how you get treated at the polling place. I guarantee you it's going to be different than showing up by yourself.
Yeah. And just from a design perspective, we've designed Walk the Vote, like I said, to be modular and adaptable to every community. So, you know, it's everybody who signs up, they sign up as a captain, and the captain is the one who recruits the the walkers. And you can create it the way you want to, and you create it and you adapt it to your particular situation. And we have guidance in there, like make sure that you are meeting the regulations for the number of people that can gather in a community. You know, scan your vicinity just in case there are people who are trying to intimidate. We've got all of that, but ultimately the person who's the captain with their community get to determine what the walk is going to look like. So when you see the videos that we have, if you go to #WalkTheVote, you'll see some of it on Twitter and such. Everything looks different. Like every walk has looked different.
Katherine, I know you're going to have to leave us in a moment, so I wanted to just get any of your observations. We started off talking about innovation in politics. We've had a kind of a master lesson of on the ground. I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts or questions before we thank you.
Well, the only thing I'll say is how optimistic an event and a discussion like this makes me on a Friday night, because I think that for so many of us in the country, we've always thought of our participation in politics as being, let's vote. But it turns out it's, yes, let's vote, but then let's help others vote and let's help others be in the process. I love you said reduce the distance between the elected officials and the regular people. And it's also get involved in the design of the rules of the game. So these are all the things we can do. And look at Americans doing this. Yes. It's extraordinary. It makes me so happy.
Beautiful.
Thanks for having me. You made my.
Thank you so much. And now, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. And now we're going to move on to even more of the designs of the rules of the game. I would like to bring up our next guests, both Aiden Cohn-Murphy and his cousin Ari Cohn. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us.
Be here.
Okay, let me set this up. I mentioned at the top that the inspiration to do this show was friends of mine who were kind of in their 20s who weren't sure that politics mattered or how to get involved or make a change. And then I'm talking to Ari, who started the Next Gen Politics podcast aiming at Gen Zers, has had up to 1 million views specifically to engage Gen Z. And then she told me of her cousin Aiden. You guys started with TikTokers for Markey. Now you've become TikTokers for Biden. You have a reach of close to 100 million people. Talk to us a little bit about, Ari, what inspired you to do all of this, and then Aiden, where TikTokers for Biden and TikTok as a medium has come in to motivate this generation.
Yeah, so Aiden and I, we started the podcast together, and it basically came from a place that we felt that we wanted, our generation has so much, and not anxiety, but everyone feels, this election holds so much, and people are anxious about what the outcomes will be, and we want to, but that anxiety doesn't necessarily turn into action, and we felt like we wanted to sort of help educate our viewers, and it needed to come from kids because kids listen to kids, and that would be a way to sort of usher in this new generation of educated voters who would then, as we've been hearing about, bring humanity back into politics, bring politics and people together, and to sort of bridge the gap. So that was through education, through our podcast. That was initially what our goal was. Aiden, do you have anything to add?
That's how I started the podcast. I think that what we were especially focused on, as Ari was saying, is like registering young people to vote, because our generation is one of the most, I'm not sure stats on this, but we're a very progressive generation. and who believes like so strongly in social justice. But unfortunately, that does not, like, our passion for social justice does not stay true when it comes to voting. And whether that's distrust in the system or just not knowing how to vote, that's something that we wanted to tackle.
You know, one of the things that that I remember seeing a few years ago was that Sandra Day O'Connor, one of the Supreme Court justices, was working with a game company to actually build a digital game called iCivics. And the idea was that you would actually play this game, and it's massively distributed. And it was a set of curriculum so that you could actually learn how to actually participate in your own school council's election, in your own neighborhood's work, and other things, so that you got an engagement right when you were, you know, a sophomore in high school. You got to actually see what it felt like to do participatory work. And you could feel it early, because her belief was that if you don't feel it, and I think what you're doing is helping people really feel that they can take action, similar to what Sarah and Lena and Roy have said. How do we close this gap so that apathy doesn't take over? And frankly, I mean, I'm a really old person, so I'm certainly Gen A or something, I don't know, compared to Gen Z. But what I worry about is so much attack on our brains to strip mine our cognition, so that we have no way to think about things, and we just get apathetic, and we're just sort of like, you know, doom scrolling all the time. And I've been looking for ways of joy scrolling to reverse that. And for me, it's making. I make stuff. I go in the shop and I make things for other people and things, and for myself, because I'm really selfish. But what I have been amazed by, and we've got 2 student interns, the passion around social justice for the Gen Z group, and the passion around environmental justice, like thinking of the planet as a constituent, is really powerful. What are you seeing in terms of the reaction? What are you seeing in terms of people, your generation, getting involved? How are you helping bridge that gap from I'm interested, I have passion, but I need to do something?
Well, I can talk about that from the TikTok for Biden element, which is the thing that I'm running right now. I think what our main focus. So everyone in our group, I think except for like 1 or 2 exceptions, we have a total of 350 creators. Almost all of them are members of Gen Z. And I think what we are learning is, for better or for worse, like, young people don't really listen to adults, which definitely has its problems. But young people don't necessarily listen to adults, but the people that they are more likely to listen to are in fact young people. And so I think what we are realizing is that the most effective way to communicate with Gen Z is through Gen Z. And so that's basically what we've been focusing on. And we've made videos about certain like voter registration deadlines. And we have like in our link tree, which is like you press on the link in our bio and it has a bunch of options for our website, for merch, etc. And one of those and one of our options is like registering to vote, learning what's on your ballot. And our link tree, it's been a week, it's been viewed over 60,000 times. So we don't have stats on how many people have clicked on each link, but we are seeing some serious traffic on our account. And especially when we're so focused on voting, that definitely transmits into actual voter registration.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd add too about sort of bringing, about the sort of TikTok component is, again, it's bringing people who would not otherwise be, be in sort of the realm of interest with politics. It's bringing those people into this into politics, so they feel invested and they feel like their opinion, what they think, matters. And that TikTok, communicating through channels that we can understand better, that's just one way of doing it.
So I love this idea that you both have the political podcast to be able to kind of talk your generation to your generation, but also that you're recruiting in some ways creators who have already shown to themselves to be kind of super creative about how to play TikTok and how to use it and how to create new content, and getting them to actually understand that they can turn that passion towards something that's really important right now. It just feels like I love this connection. Mohib, can you pull up my whiteboard? Because I've been trying to keep track of this whole damn conversation. So I got, election matters so much. This makes us anxious. How do we take action? Register to vote, registration deadlines, the link tree, TikTok for Biden. getting reach out there, the celebrations of just, going to the election and being able to do that. How do we close the gap between, regular citizens and powerful people? And then how do we do five forces and really try to see if we could come up with something like a special interest for the general interest? So if we look at the sort of conversation we've had so far, I'm curious, maybe Ari and Aiden, what are your reactions to what you heard from Katherine? What are your reactions to what you heard from Roy or Sarah or Lena?
Well, what I would say is that I think Gen Z can start to tackle these problems. So like what I've noticed is that our group, the group of creators, also this is our logo. I have it right here. It's Gen Z. So I think our main, what I realized in this, and so I do have a semi-popular TikTok account myself. I have about 160,000 followers. But what I've realized is that there are a lot of creators on TikTok who like charge for ads and for like doing something that they didn't like come up with, stuff like that. They charge a lot of money. So there is a lot of money in the TikTok world. But what I've been so amazed by, and which makes me so happy, is that like no one involved in TikTok for Biden is doing this for a profit. We are not taking a cent of profit, not from our merch, not from any money we make. We're not taking profit. So what has amazed me is that like the sense of civic responsibility, there is such a sense of civic responsibility in young people that I think like is a little bit, and that I have not seen as much in older generations. So I think that our generation can start to move like money out of politics, and start to tackle these issues that we were talking about.
And through technology is that alternative form. You don't need to use money anymore because there's this thing that's free, but it reaches, it's far reaching in the same way that you sort of money would be. And that's what you're going to see with our generation. Money's going to become less important, and it's going to be about the rise of technology.
I would love you to tell us the story, Aiden and Ari, about what happened with Ed Markey when Senator Markey, who was running for re-election in Massachusetts, was kind of a middle-aged, moderate guy, and yet he aligned with AOC. And then the TikTokers came in, and then suddenly you started developing messaging for young people. And he defeated Kennedy, he defeated Pelosi. Walk us through how that all happened and how that morphed into what we have now for Biden.
Okay, so yeah, totally. So I would push back a little bit on the notion that Markey was a moderate, and he has moved significantly to the left in recent memory, with like work on. I mean, he's a original co-sponsor of Medicare for All, Green New Deals, but that's not my point here. My point is that I think that like what, to your point, Markey was not necessarily about TikTok, because I can say so Ari and I did work on the campaign, and like one of like a very small role that I took on was organizing this TikTok for Ed event. And it was not a particular, like, I think we had like 5 or 10 creators. We did one phone bank event. We like launched like a group account on TikTok and got like 1,000 followers. And so that, and it ended up being one of the most successful like vote builder, which is one of the types of phone banks that we had. So it was very successful. We made like 2,000 calls with our followers in total in like 45 minutes, which is great. And I think that the Markey campaign like was a testament to the power of young people, because there were like 300 fellows who were working on the campaign who are all young people and who devoted so much time. Ari and I are very competitive. So there was a fellow like
leaderboard,
phone banking leaderboard. So like whoever made the most calls, whoever identified the most supporters, Ari and I were always numbers 1 and 2, and were typically at least 2 times what the 3rd place person was. So I think everyone, that was just an example of Gen Z like stepping in, even now when a lot of us can't even vote, stepping in against like tradition and against the establishment. And I think the way this turned into TikTok for Biden is the night of the first presidential debate. I was talking to a few TikTok friends of mine, and it was obviously such an insane night, and a lot of us felt like very powerless. And it just popped into my mind. I was like, why not try to use our platforms for good? This is a TikToker who I didn't know when I organized TikTok for Markey. We both have a much wider range of like people that we know on TikTok. And so it was originally just supposed to be like 10 TikTokers organize an event, and that's that. things started snowballing. I think we went from 10 creators, 20 creators, 50 creators, 100 creators, 200 creators. We're now at 350 creators with a combined following of over 150 million. And our group account, we launched it a week ago, and we already have about 750,000 followers, which is like unheard of on TikTok in the sense of growing that quickly. And our goal quickly became so much bigger. Like selling merch, we sell merch that we donate, that we're donating to Democratic campaigns and to charity. We're
Now, hold on one second. I just want to clarify for anybody that's over 16 years old. Merch, what does that mean? What is merch?
Merchandise.
I'm sorry.
Like
Okay.
clothing. Like we
Got
have tons of here. I'll move my logo back into the frame again.
All right.
We
Yeah,
have
that's
logo on a bunch of
like T-shirts and a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, very cool.
A bunch of other logos and a bunch of other types of clothing, and we're donating. We're not taking any profit. We're donating it all to charity and to campaigns. And so I think basically, to wrap up, that is our goal. I think we were able to broaden so much by like just how the hundreds of creators that joined, and this just became so much larger than.
Did it surprise you?
You could argue that you know, if the story of the 2016 election was Trump and Facebook, Cambridge Analytica using that medium, just as the way Jack Kennedy used TV in 1960, if you go from essentially a standing start to 150 million combined followers or 200 creators on a thing at once, that's kind of a state change here, which and we've seen TikTok a bit under the radars, you know, like it disrupted that Trump rally. Here's a question I have. Here we have Lena and Sarah and Roy, who have this wonderful mechanism that is engaging people in real time to go out and vote, safety in numbers. And here we have you with enormous reach. And I'm wondering how the two of you collaborate, come together, mutually inform each other so that these two mechanisms can reinforce each other. More people can turn out to vote and more people can become aware of it and younger people can be part of that effort.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I can just say, I'll just real quickly, Aiden. So one of the features we have in our podcast is after we've, gone through the news, we've talked, usually we have sort of a young activists come on and we talk. And then after that, we'll have, next steps, things you can do. And once you have them, you've hooked, you talked about the problems, you've talked about why it's so important, especially, we always have to, because, it's true, the stereotype, young people are self-oriented, but it's so, what you've made the case for why it's so important for youth. And now you have these action plans. So this could be one of those, action plans that we say, okay, so now, this election is so important. We've convinced you of that. Now you can get involved with this amazing organization that's sort of bringing the joy back into voting and, just continuing that, because TikTok is fun. And this whole, that's all the things, we've talked about Gen Z, they're all into experience and fun. This just continues that trend. So in many ways, it's just a great sort of, it's a great next step for so many of our followers for, TikTok providing and for the podcast. It's just, something that could be, you bought into the situation. Now this is what you do.
If I can jump in for 1 second. First of all, I'm like so hopeful right now. Thank you, Ari and Aiden. Oh my God, it's amazing. But also I think Walk the Vote is sort of tailor-made for TikTok because we want every single walk to be different and unique and everybody celebrate. And I think it's beautiful, just a TikTok video of every single different kind of walk there can be. I would love to see that. And you don't have to be a voter. Like you can have voted already as long as you don't vote again. You can be younger than voting age as long as you're accompanying. It's a party, basically. It's a parade. And so if you're going with people who are old enough to vote, you can be part of it too. So I would love to see a ton of TikTok videos of like different kinds of walks, that would be so much fun.
Ooh. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
We love those. Yeah.
I'm challenging you to come.
Are you offering these as merch, Lena?
These are not merch. These are just
T-shirts. No.
Yeah, you can put them into your TikTok videos, put them into everything. But I Ari and Aiden.
Now, I do want to flag, though, that I
You
came
can,
from
you can
Chicago.
go to our
And,
Teespring store, though. There is merch.
oh, there's merch. All right.
Merch on the Teespring store.
I do want to point out for Aiden and Ari.
Or a T-shirt to be a captain. We couldn't get speakers in time because the supply chain.
So you got merch.
Iffy.
Yeah,
I want to point out, though, for Aiden and Ari, I came from Chicago, and I grew up in the Chicago kind of political machine. And our mission, or our saying in Chicago was vote early and vote often. We would raise the dead. We would go count like cemeteries. We'd find dead people. We'd register them to vote. I'm completely making that up, but that is actually something that is very well known in Chicago politics. Is unfortunately, a lot of people voted that weren't even around anymore.
Can I add a thought when you're ready? I have a thought on political influence I'd like to add here, and then I want to show some of the TikTok for Biden stuff.
Oh yeah.
All right. I grew up in Chicago, Mickey, and my mom wanted to influence Mayor Daley, and because she wasn't his top donors, but we were part of a machine.
Mayor Daley Sr.
Who his dentist was, and they went to the same dentist, and she cornered the mayor when he had stuff in his mouth, and basically told him what he needed to do for stoplights and for our street. And
closing the powerful gap between normal citizens. How did it work out? I mean, and your mom is a force of nature.
Yeah. We got the stoplight and whatever we needed, and then the dentist took the stuff out of his mouth.
Okay. Don't take it out until he's gotten it. That's not merch, though. That's something else. When you
hey, Mohit,
take someone
run. I would love to show a couple of the TikTok for Biden TikTok videos, because for anybody that is too old to have acquired merch, they may not have seen these yet. So can you go ahead and run those, Mohit? And while Mohit's getting those ready, there we go.
Oh shit, shake that ass, one moving like the gypsy. Stop, oh, back it up, now let me see it. Oh shit, shake that ass, one moving like the gypsy. Stop, oh, back it up, now let me see it. Now drop it down and let me see it. Now to the floor, now let me see it. Now drop it down and let me see it. Now to the floor, now let me see it. Uh-oh, lean back, girl, you got some mean rags. You got a mean ass, and I really mean that. But can't you see that I need a girl that can move, make her hips and look just like you? But got to think about it, I think it's better.
Hello everyone, I'm Brooklyn Webb and I'm proud to be a part of TikTok for Biden. Today I wanted to share our merch with all of you. All of our merch designs are original and designed by our team member Katie O'Lady. And every penny of profit will be going towards Biden's campaign and numerous charities, such as COVID relief funds, Black Lives Matter, as well as others. They are super trendy and you should get some before they're gone. And remember, Gen Z is the future.
Okay. How many? All right, good. Welcome back, everybody. Another question between Nina and Aiden and everybody. I understand how we could use TikTok to amplify this. How do we get more people to create more voting walks so that we can use TikTok to start organizing these things in communities that need them? Because I know you have a kit and a recruiting thing, so it almost feels like you want TikTok to go upstream and start getting people to make some of this stuff happen. What would be the ideal outcome here?
Well, first I want to explain a little bit about those TikToks. The medium is I have heard from my parents that it's a little bit challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're supposed to be paying attention to the sound. Sometimes it's just there because silence would be weird. But so that was the first video we made. I think it's up to like 2 million views right now on our account. I think we posted it like last Wednesday. And that was our intro video from a number of some of our most popular creators, just kind of introducing who we are. And then the second one was about our merch. And so I think that what TikTok can do, and I think that what we're setting out to prove, and I think that we will be able to do it, is that TikTok can be used. So digital organizing and relational organizing, in my mind, are one and the same. And the skills that I got from the Markey campaign, the skills about like their big thing was relational organizing. We had like friend banks. where and one of the things we actually did was we had our own personal supporter pages, and we would send that to our friends to get them to fill out them. And TikTok may have been a slightly unfair advantage. I think the end tally was I had, what did I have? I had like 2,000 or 3,000 signed up on my page. The next person was Ari with 250, and the person after that had like 60. So I think that just proves the power of social media, and we use those tools of relational organizing and social media into TikTok for Biden. And because like management agencies and parties and just like PACs, I'm sure, have been working so incredibly hard to try to organize something like this. But what they run into is that like creators aren't gonna do something for free if it seems like it's adults telling them what to do. But I think what we're realizing is that when we involve members of Gen Z and when it's a community, like people are so much more willing and ready. And
well, it's got to be native. It's got to come from the community and from those creators that have to believe in it and they want it, right? And they have to figure it out. I know, Aiden, you have to leave fairly soon. This has been amazing. I mean, it's super inspiring and exciting, and I'm so worried and excited about the future at the same time, and maybe worried because you're really competitive, but also super excited because I love that. I love the passion, and I mean, we even heard from Katherine Gale about how the competition comes from the edges and people kind of inventing new things to get innovation. I'd love to show one last thing that Lena and Sarah and Roy have shared, just to kind of close the loop on this, because there's been some of the generation maybe before Gen Z, or somewhere maybe the Gen Xers, and I guess I'm a Gen Xer, and I don't even know what goes else, but they've been thinking about how to use their platform as well. And can we run that video?
What up, though? This is Big Snoop Dogg with a message to all of the voters everywhere. We want people to stay safe by securely dropping their ballots off in a hashtag Walk the Vote Parade. That's right, hashtag Walk the Vote Parade. Please believe it, man, in a real way. It's WeWalkTheVote.com. We are inspired by your energy and your voting, and we need everybody to pay attention to this message. Stay safe, stay strong, and please walk the vote, because that's the parade. Peace, love, and blessings from Big Snoop D-O-double-G.
Perfect. I understood everything he was saying because he's
definitely Gen
my
X
generation. Yeah, that was it. He speaks from experience.
So
thank you so much. That was excellent. Lena, go ahead.
Before Aiden goes, I just want to say that I think what I love also about what you've been saying and Ari's been saying is that with Walk the Vote, we don't, as adults, we do not want to tell anybody what to do. That's why we've designed it, so that communities can do it themselves. And so we should get in touch. I would love to see TikTok, TikTok for Biden, take it and run, as you all like, but we'll be there. Take it and walk.
That's exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry he couldn't join us, but Alexis de Tocqueville would have loved this hour, because when he wrote Democracy in America, he came over here and he said, these Americans, they'll form an association for anything, and we Europeans have to ask the king what to do. And this was an example today of real-time innovation. I think all of you need to leave. Usually we go on for a long time, but there's such urgency here. Aiden has to get on a call with the rest of TikTokers for Biden and not let 150 million people down. And Roy and Sarah and Lena have to get back to Wisconsin because there's walking and voting to be done. And I think that leaves just Mickey, you and me in California, because we probably dropped our ballot in. So I don't know what's
actually. I mailed my ballot because I'm in Pennsylvania. That's where I live, and so I did a mail-in last week. I'm happy to do it, and it's a swing state, so that wouldn't be bad. I think go forth, everybody. This is amazing.
Aiden, Ari, how do we follow your podcast? And why don't you give us some of the topics you've covered? Because you've done a very thoughtful podcast interpreting politics for young people. What are some of the topics?
Yeah, so we've covered sort of, I'll just going from on the last couple of ones that we've done. We did a huge, we've done some in-depth episodes. We did one on DC statehood, which was a really interesting sort of, you don't hear a lot in mainstream media, but really something interesting to talk about because we live in a democracy, but not everyone votes like it's a democracy. And then the other thing, some other interesting things we've done are, politicians being idolized. We had a really great, we've had some Isra Hirshi, who's the daughter of Ilhan Omar, who came on and talked about, she's also started the U.S. climate strikes, and she came in and talked about, idolizing our politicians, and that was a really interesting episode. We had a whole debrief about the Markey campaign, our experience on it. That was a great one. And so it just, you can follow us. We're on everything, Next Generation Politics Podcast. YouTube, if that's your liking, or we also have Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, pretty much everything under the sun. So just, look up the Next Generation Politics Podcast and you'll find it.
And then also before I go, I just want to thank Ari. And I want to thank you guys for letting me be on. And thank you again to Ari. I could not have done any of this without her. And our competition as cousins, I think, drives us both to great heights.
Yes.
This completely connects back to the beginning of the show when Katherine told us that we ought to bring competition into the political system. And here we have a familiar competition driving competition in the political system. That's just great. Sarah and Roy, when do you return to California?
That is a matter of some debate. We had friends who wanted to rent our house, so we'll be back sometime after the end of January.
Once we take the country back.
Yes.
Wow. We won't see you until January, except for virtually.
Well, I mean, there might need to be a vaccine first anyway. So
right.
Right now. Meanwhile, I got things to work on, like promoting new podcasts that I just learned about. So
you can always come to Wisconsin, The drive is pretty nice if long.
I know. Actually, at least it's a state that matters. DC, our vote does not matter, but
after 13 years in the Bay Area and 10 in New York before that, it's really, really nice to be in a place that where it's all on the line and it's
where politicians want your vote and not just your money.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say as a New Yorker, it's just nice to vote against a New Yorker who shouldn't be a New Yorker.
There's that too. I want to say, I think,
even though Walk the Vote's nonpartisan, I'm just saying.
No, but there's something also about the creative impulse driving all of this rather than the competitive one. And I want to honor that because it's the thing that inspires me and has inspired me these last few years on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is that there are culture bearers among us, right? And we are investing in what we in education call the reflective work on the walls. We are demanding that what we see in front of us feels like it reflects us. And, that to me will inspire me for years and years to come.
This has been a remarkably inspiring podcast, mostly because innovation has been breaking out all over, right? Here's this problem with the political system, and we've seen three approaches. We've seen this strategic academic approach, we've seen this organizing and on the ground approach, but heavily influenced by design, and then this young and new media approach. And what I find so exciting about what was going on with TikTok is, when new media come on, they have to figure out what they are. And TikTok and politics really literally figured it out in the last several months, right? And now we're seeing it. All right, 2 weeks ago on this show, we were promoting an event that the Gray Area has been doing. Andrew McLuhan, Marshall McLuhan's grandson, has been teaching Understanding Media. And I sent off to Andrew and to our class as we are going to convene tomorrow. It's a 12-week class in which we're applying McLuhan to the contemporary world. But part of the most fun is to insert completely new media. So we have inserted TikTok into that.
For Ari and Aiden, Marshall McLuhan said something, the medium is the message, and actually changed it to the medium is the massage, because he believes that, and this was in the 50s, he actually, his documentary is called The Medium is the Massage. And he meant that it basically is manipulating us, and we have to beware. And it might calm us too much, and we will become sedated. So I thought it was a typo. I was like, Peter, I can't believe Marshall McLuhan had a typo. And Peter was like, no, you have to watch the documentary. It's amazing.
Well, thank you again.
Also,
Just
I want to thank everyone because I know you all have to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure to be here, and so nice to meet you all, and so nice to see that there are other people out there, and people not that we only interact with people our own age right now, but it's so nice to see the other generations who are fighting for the same things we are.
We will check back in with all of you soon. Now you have to leave to get people to vote, to register, and for the next 150 million impressions. Thank you, guys. And Nick, you and I can finish up and preview next week's shows.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, that was extraordinary. Hi, Lena. Well, bye, Lena. That was great.
Are we live still? Yes, we are.
We're still here. And
so actually, it'd be nice. I mean, that was amazing, and I took a lot of notes. I think. I don't know. I just get so excited when I hear about all these things because they're just stuff I don't know, and I hope everyone gets a chance to maybe go on a parade. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there was a Dr. Seuss book called "I Saw It All Happen on Mulberry Street," and it was about a parade that went right past this kid's house, and it was just all the Dr. Seuss crazy kind of reality. But when I was a kid growing up on a porch stoop in Chicago, you got to watch the world go by, and you also got to go march in the parade. And I think this idea of a socially distanced, safe, safety in numbers approach is inspiring. And of course, Katherine's work has really opened my eyes to stepping back and making sure that, some people say a fish will never discover the idea of water because they're in water. And I think sometimes we can't discover the idea of America unless we can step back and kind of look at it through a new lens. And that's what we saw from all of our guests today. So very exciting. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up in future shows?
I do. I also want to point out that even though we're not going to bring Marshall McLuhan on tonight.
I thought you had de Tocqueville lined up. I thought you found some old kinescope or something.
Yeah, he died in like 1890. You're right. There probably is not. There's probably not footage of Tocqueville.
So sad.
But by the way, the other great thing about what Walk the Vote is doing is it connects three things, right? It connects, first of all, this voting as a celebration and an act of citizenship. So the very Tocquevillian American kind of thing, which is it's wonderful. We're doing it together. It's nonpartisan. It also connects it with the dark side, which is there's a lot of voter suppression out there. And if the boogeyman's going to keep you from voting, better that 50 of you show up. And so, what two interesting portions of the American story, the great participatory one and the disenfranchising one. And then their third part of it is, well, there's COVID, so we have to organize ourselves with socially distanced and the right number of people and the masks. And, that's just a very interesting design response to that whole thing. Another, just by the way, an interesting observation, 24 hours ago, there was a lot of angina because if you remember, the debate was canceled and then ABC gave the space to Biden, and then Trump showed up with NBC and it's like, I'm going to have my own. And people were like, Trump's sucking all the air out of the room. And what was amazing last night, kind of from a McLuhan-esque point of view, is here is America in a bubble. And what was perfectly represented is each bubble had its own broadcast. And each bubble got to do its own thing. And you had this wonderful comparison that James Fallows finally called Mr. Rogers versus the Joker. Right?
Oh my goodness.
And you could not watch both of those. You could not watch both of those because they're in two networks, but you could watch the Twitter feed that tried to make the sense of the two of them. And it was probably the greatest example of a contemporaneous Twitter feed in the history of television. TV doesn't need Twitter. I mean, we watch Twitter during the Super Bowl or during the Academy Awards to talk about the actors and the actresses, but you could only watch this event by watching Twitter to see how it became, what happened. And what was amazing is, why did Donald Trump need to take on Joe Biden when he basically competed with himself and ate himself? And And we were all worried that Donald Trump would use up all of the air in the room, and he basically asphyxiated himself last night with being questioned by Savannah Guthrie, who also is probably the journalistic hero because anyway, it was a very interesting, and from a media hot and cold analysis, you kind of had hot Donald Trump. Hot media is stuff that's coming at you in your face. You don't have to fill anything in. Trump once described Fidel Castro as very hot media because he gave these huge long speeches. Cold media is media that you have to fill in, which is kind of what Twitter was doing. I just thought that
interesting
that between watching last night and hearing about TikTok today, I feel like this is one of these weeks where the future's coming at you in a very deep slope. Let's talk about
it. Very much is next week. So actually, next week is going to be fun. Next Wednesday, we're going to have an episode. And we're super excited. We've got Danny Lang, who is the head of artificial intelligence machine learning at Unity. And he's going to be sharing some really fascinating things that are happening. He actually led AI at Uber as well. And where they're using virtual worlds. We've been talking a lot about how virtual worlds are kind of having their moment to some extent. He's going to talk about how organizations like BMW and others are putting billions of miles of simulated driving on their autonomous vehicles in virtual spaces with real physics so that they could actually have every possibility explore. And it's this notion of, could I create a stunt double universe and build a lot of what they call synthetic training data instead of driving around in the streets, maybe hitting people, etc. Could we use this to actually build a lot more assurance and training for the machine learning so that when they really do go out on the road, they've actually put on the miles? And we're going to have Kristen Berman from Dan Ariely, who created Predictably Irrational, and he created the Duke Center for Advanced Hindsight, a world-renowned behavioral economist and scientist. He and Kristen Berman got together and created something called the Irrational Lab. And it's really about how do we actually understand how much people really know about why they make decisions. And she's going to be sharing kind of her perspective on what she's seeing Danny and Unity doing, but also on how they've learned from building an irrational lab to help us understand how much context and environment and other things shape what we do. So that'll be next Wednesday. And at the end of the month, it looks like we're going to have Timoni from Unity talking about mixed reality and augmented reality. And we're going to have some other guests in between. So I'm kind of super excited. The agenda is coming together soon, and I'm sure we're going to have another one just before the election about the election.
I want to just emphasize this conversation with Danny. So when people think of Unity, it's a platform that most people think of as building casual games, mobile games. Danny came there, and it was a gaming platform, and he quickly turned it into a very significant machine learning platform so that it could serve both the gaming industry, so you could do much higher level software programming, but as you point out, also things like the automotive industry, so it can create essentially agents or instances that create lots and lots of data.
Yeah, now, I think he was sort of employee one for machine learning at Unity. Now, if you think about Unity, you've got agents running around all over the place in games. When the orcs are going to battle you, they have to be autonomous agents that have goals. They wander around and they're like, I must beat Peter over the head. And in many cases, these agents actually learn over time. So like if you beat this orc with a good sword, because you're like an amazing swordsman, if you bump into that orc, at a saloon 5 years later, it goes back and computes all the ways that it was beat by you, and it actually has learned how to play swords and become a great swordsman. So it holds a grudge, and it tells its buddies, and then you've got to fight against it again. So these are evolutionary agents that have already been happening, but they have not been applied for the real world. And I think that's the exciting thing that Danny is starting to see.
And so you see two things coming together. You see simulation in the real world. So we're talking about digital twins, architecture for buildings, city simulation. So that's coming together. And of course, at the same time, in console games, kids use this stuff. As these two things merge, then we get to the point where we can actually start simulating and playing with the world that we want. If we start playing with the economics that we want, or which of these environmental mechanisms work, or any of these other kind of mechanisms. So and of course that's
even today. Could we put in the design rules that Katherine Gale came up with, Michael Porter, and play out the next 30 years of America if the currency exchange between votes and money was tweaked?
And if you look at the long arc of what we're doing here in Quarantine, you remember we did a show a few shows ago on New World Fair, which is an initiative to actually build such a model, plug that into actually the motivating of capital, the motivating of research, and then the real world. So that's kind of the long-term kind of project we're working on. Right. And then you see these very interesting things like digital twinning come together. The other show that we're doing with Unity is, in fact, I believe, with the people, Timoni leading digital twinning, and the guy in the UK who is applying this to cities. Right. So that's
actually digital twins for the entire UK. How do you build infrastructure? Let's say you build the tube in London, or you build Heathrow Airport. A lot of architects focus on the creation of that building. But really, that thing's going to have to last for 50 years. So how do you build a digital twin that you can actually really understand infrastructure? And the UK at a government level has put forth a real deep need for building a digital twin architecture and framework. And we're going to have a guest that can talk about that as well. So it's very exciting.
And the other show that we haven't announced, but we'll tease it here and should be happening, I think, just before the election. We're going to apply these things to issues around the future of San Francisco. So I've been doing an effort for our mayor that's reimagining, well, what are the things we have to think about in a post-COVID San Francisco? Here we are, a great international technology city, but we're also the world leader in, if you're in tech, you can go work at home or move somewhere else. So that creates a really interesting dynamic with commercial real estate and what is a tech headquarters anyway. We are a great art city, but you're not supposed to get together, except that we're probably the leading city with arts and the virtual world. So kind of what does that mean about the public square and stuff? What does this mean about local manufacturing and supply chain for our city? Because clearly we're going to need more resilient supply chains, quite aside from the fact that to keep wealth in America, we may need to build more in America. So we're going to do a show with a number of people beginning to apply this. And, we did one early in the pandemic with people like Kent Larson and some city planning people. So that's what's coming up. And today was extraordinary because it gave us a lens into the leading edge of the election. It was a nice break from generally, Hannity and Maddow yelling at each other, which is too much what politics feels like in America. And
it was wonderful. I say, what time is it, Peter? I think it's time to go shut down and call the episode.
Nikki, right now it's 5:37 Pacific Quarantine. Let's call it a wrap. Mohib, thank you so much for engineering our show today. See you next week.
Let's get close, but not so close.